It's a question that people presented to me in the past several days, and I want to take this opportunity from here, Long Island, New York, to thank not only the people who attend the shiur, but those who watch us. I get several times email, phone calls, and here is one of the questions that people ask. Is a fellow living in one of the busy central city in Israel, and he purchased a apartment with understanding that the price it's for 100 square, they call it in those in Israeli term it's called arnona, which means the way that they make the taxes in the city, it's by certain size, and basically he bought it, for our simple understanding, 100, and then he just applied for taxes, and the city sent a inspector, and the inspector checked the apartment and it turned to be 86 square meters. So he asked a question. The buyer said that he wants his money back, and here is the dispute between the two that enter to the domain of the Bet Din, that based on our study today you have a springboard of a serious debate. The seller said, I gave you a good deal. The buyer said, it is true, but you gave me with understanding that this is 100. The seller said, so I'll take it back. The buyer said, I want to live there. The seller said, so what do you want from me? The buyer said, I want you to give me back 250,000 shekel. Why is that? Because he purchased it from him for 1,850,000 shekel. With understanding that this is 100, the size of 100, the seller present to a buyer papers of the city that's the size. The city charged him taxes. When the buyer brought the inspector of the city and they measured the apartment, it turned to be 85, which is, if you evaluate by the average appraiser over there, it's about 250 to 300,000 shekel different, which is about 80K. So the question is, to whom you go? The same question applies to those selling papers. In Israel, again, is more happen, but it happens all over the world. People buying papers, meaning they're buying a right over a property that will be built, apartment that will be built. So the builder basically selling either an option or upcoming apartment in 2, 3, 4 years from now that will be ready, with certain price, and obviously the closest you get to the time of getting the key, the more money that property worth. That's the average case. So the question is, if is a different understanding between the buyer and seller, which comment, the builder promised one thing, the buyer get there and he measure and he see different things, especially if it was not clearly written, this type of size or this type of measurement between the two parties, in which way you go by the seller or the buyer, and why. We're going also to study the disputation not only between partners or people who are buying and selling, but also, unfortunately, it happens between brothers, which is, in a simple case, two brothers inherited different properties or a land, and they're now in dispute which one take what. It wasn't spelled out clearly from the late father who is going to get what. So, for example, if it's a house that have 2 floors, 2 separate tenants, who's going to get what? The house itself, you evaluate by the house and you split it. You give one brother the top and the other brother the bottom. Who is going to get what and how? We're going to learn the kinyan goral. Kinyan goral meaning, sometimes we use the term of lottery, but it's a heavy disputation between the Rambam Ravid, Rosh, in a tour, and the Rashbam. How do you go about when it's come to lottery? Is the lottery make the matter of kinyan, matter of acquisition, which means if you decided to go and take a lottery, the one who won, he won it by the matter of acquisition or not? It's a lot of differences. We're going also to learn several teshuvos from more contemporary. Sample of question is a question that presented to Salmat Chaim, was the late Rabbi Zamenfeld. It was the two brothers that inherited a very expensive Hanukkah menorah, that wasn't only silver made and very expensive, but was also inherited in a very deep sentimental way from their late great-grandparents, and they believe that it carries a special sanctity. Each of the two brothers wanted that Chanukiah. They took a lottery and one of the brothers won. So let's use a name. Reuven won, Shimon lost. The next thing you hear is that Shimon is in the emergency room. He has a heart attack. And the doctor said, if you don't give him the menorah, he is going to die. So they brought it before the Rabbi Zonfeld and asked, can you go after Reuven and force him to give it to his brother or not? The idea is, Reuven said, I won by the proper legal terms, and it's mine, and it's almost like a blackmail. So again, we're going to study a teshuva, a responsa from Salmat Chaim, from Rabbi Rosenfeld and Rabbi Zolti in regards to this matter. So here we are on page 106, the top of the page at the Mishnah. Mishnah said, Besimanav uvmetzarav. Reuven said to Shimon, look, you see this property, it's called in the language of the Talmud, Beit Korafar. I'm selling you this property, whatever you see, and he said, with its particular demarcation and border. Besimanav ubetzarav. So in other words, in one hand he showed him the estate, and he said, you take everything. So in a way, the way that the Prisha in Choshen Mishpat Reshut Chet and also the Rashbam said that it's kind of Tarte de Sadre, two things that's not clear. One is more precise, the other one it's very ambiguous. So in a sense, if it was a very clear then obviously the purchaser cannot renege or cannot back out, and he bought it, and he cannot come back and say that it was a different understanding. But here the Mishnah wants to deal with the concept of shtut. Shtut, we explained many times, when it's come to sell any merchandise, you have the real number that you can make, which is in general term it's 1/6. 1/6 in that sense it's the midterm. So the Mishnah said pachot mishtut higio. If it's still less than 1/6, then basically it is the buyer. It's already it's a buyer the way it is, and nothing changed. However, if the chariga, if the change exceeded, and it's ad shtut yenakeh, which means if it's more, so basically he need to deduct the difference from the purchase price and return the money to the buyer. Basically, the way you juxtapose it to a previous Mishnayot, up to this point we talk about 4%. Here the difference is 16%. It's 4 times. So, in one hand, he bought the estate in a certain size, but on the other hand, he showed him a borderline. So here you see that you have a different size, but the big question is how far you go with this, if it's more, if it's less, or if it's exact. So the way that the Rashbam explained to us, and that's the way we understand the Tana in the Mishnah, that if it's a pachot mishtut higio, if it's less than 1/6, then it's a done deal. If it's yoter mishtut, if it's more than 1/6, then so you need to deduct the difference and return it. The big discussion here in the Gemarrah, that's the way the Rashbam explains, is the umdena de Rabbanan, which means when it's come to a real shtut, that 1/6, how you go, because the broader understanding of the sages is how people, if people really care or not. In Hebrew you call it hakpadat anashim, if people really care for difference. So the assumption is that if it's a pachot mishtut, people usually less than 1/6 people let go. If it's more, people wants the money back. But if it's exact shtut, exact 1/6, then it's a discussion here. Itmar Rav Huna amar shtut kepachot mishtut, Rav Yehuda amar shtut beyoter mishtut. So the Rashba bring the Ravid, who said that the way that here Rav Huna explained that shtut higio, which means up to the shtut, up to 1/6, no one everything. The whole discussion is how you treated the shtut. So according to Rav Huna, you treated shtut, the 1/6 precisely corresponding is like less than 1/6, and therefore according to Rav Huna the sale is total valid. According to Rav Yehuda, shtut keyoter mishtut, which means you treat it like it's more, and therefore you have to deduct the difference in order to make the sale valid from the original purchase price. So again, if you ask a question in practical halachot, does this seller needs to return the difference to the buyer in the case of the apartment, etc.? We are not there yet, but you see the framework of this disputation is a basic understanding of the difference, because each party, as you remember, in a practical way, claimed that was a different understanding, and here we need to measure what exactly the difference take place. The idea is we're not talking about small amount of money, it's a large size. רב יהודה אמר שטות כפחות משטות, אחי כאמר פחות משטות הוא שטות בכלל. הגיעו, so it means if it's less than 1/6, including 1/6, then the sale is valid. But he says יותר משטות ינקה. However, if he gets less, he will get more than 1/6, then is no other way, but he must deduct the difference from the purchase price. Rav Yehuda אמר שטות כיותר משטות, which means 1/6 you treated more than 1/6, אחרי כאמר פחות משטות הגיעו, עד שטות ושטות בכלל ינקה. So that's what we said, that here the Rashbam bring the Ravid, who said that that basically if it's a up to 1/6 and 6 within that, so that he must deduct the difference from the purchase price. So here we go a little deeper with the issue of the bet din itself. If one sell the field and he put the measurement within the particular demarcation and borders, and gave him the field that is 1/6 less than the measure stipulated, if you give him more than 1/6, who keshum hadayanim, and this is important because you see it a lot in the rabbinic judges. You go by the rabbinic judges' assessment of the value of the property, and therefore it is the buyers and the sales is valid, because you use the term higio. Higio meaning, in that sense, that's the purchaser get it the way it is. Veha shum hadayanim the shtut keyoter mishtutu. So the Rav Huna challenged, and he said that basically if you go by the judge's estimation, so the way that they treated, because it was a demarcation and borders, so they treated this as the 1/6 is the same as error, mistake, or with more than 1/6. And since we said in the Breita that the field that was a cell with demarcation and borders is the same as the measurement of error that the court made, it means that this Breita follow Rav Yehuda that any type of mistake or hariga of selling that is a framework of 1/6, we treated the same as exceeded more than 1/6. So Amar la Rav Huna uletamich. So Rav Huna said, according to your view, which is Rav Yehuda, that hold that you treated shtut, which means 1/6, the same as yoter mishtut, more than 1/6. So he said higio katani. So he said, so they basically it's the sale is a final, and therefore, which means that either less or more is basically machul. So here you use the word ela. I have the privilege to finish this shas, as you know, more than once. So I have a privilege to have different teachers and different chavrusos. So one time I learned this word ela, the way the Rashbam explained in the first explanation. Another time in a cycle of Shas we learn according to Rashbam the second explanation, because it's two different things. If you go by the Rashbam that whole the word ela, it's like a continuation. If you erase the word ela, so it's a total new statement. But anyway, he said keshum hadayanim velo כשום הדיינים, כשום הדיינים לשטות ולא כשום הדיינים. So basically the way you treated is like that. דאילו התם בתלמך כך, ואילו הגיעו. Over there, it's the assessment, it's the sale is voided, because the judges make the assessment that turned to be mistake. But over here, it's in the Mishnah it is a buyer's, and therefore you treated higio as a final sale, and therefore the Braita is not contradicted the view of Rav Huna. It's a as we said, it's a long and serious discussion over these two explanations of the Rashbam. We just dealt with the vignette with that. So the Gemara brings a story that relates to that. Rav Papa Zaman Ar Amahu Gavra. It was a story of Rav Papa that he purchased an estate from a certain man. Page 106b. Amar lei havya esrim grivei mashchei. This field that I'm selling you, they have the size of 20 griv, meaning that it is fit for planting 20 se'ah of grain. But unfortunately, when they measure, remember the story with the apartment we used at the beginning, all of a sudden they measure it and it's only 15. So he wants the money back. So Rav Papi came before Abaye and he says, Amar lei savart vekibilt. You really know that it's 15 because you know, you're familiar with the field. So you have to go by the way it is. I would like to show it to you the Shulchan Aruch Shel Mishpat 218 and also the Rambam Ilchot Mechira chapter 28. He said as follows. I'm reading from the translation of the Koran edition. If one sells a field to another, the Prisha said, and he says that he's selling it with its demarcation and borders. So now, the buyer is closely, listen to the language, is closely familiar with the field. So in other words, Shimon, who purchased it, he knows clearly what is this field is all about. Then even if the seller told him that the field measured 200 and is actually measured only 150, guess what? The sale is valid. Why? This is due to the fact that the buyer is familiar with the field and he is assumed to have accepted it as is. You know the sale as is? Okay, as is. And the seller merely meant to say that the field is as good as field measuring 200. Now, the Rema, citing a Tur, says that the sale is valid only if the field is indeed superior, idit, to other fields. But the Rashbam maintains that the sale is valid even if the field is not superior, and the two agree with his opinion. So, in other words, the claim of numbers, you remember the disputation of the apartment, one of the hitting part is saying, the seller said, give me back the apartment. I give you back the whole money you gave me, and I give you back the apartment. You pay me, for example, 1,000,085 shekel. Here's your money back. Get out in 30 days. I want the apartment back. Why is he saying that? Because he knows very well, with a little patience, he gets 2.2 million shekel. Or he wants it for himself, or he wants to keep it, or he regrets for selling it. He sell it under pressure, whatever it is. He knows the value. So basically, the feeling is the buyers hold, yes, the estimation of the size of the apartment was different than you, but the big question is, what's involved here? If the seller know clearly the area and he know exactly the value of the estate, so the measurement of the exact number of the apartment, because for example in real estate you go by location. So if the area it's a high-rise area, and we learned that enon ale karkaot, you have a fixed price in everything else, but not in real estate because it changes constantly. Therefore, it's very hard to prove in court that the seller needs to compensate the difference to the buyer. But here you see the source based on these two. But anyway, the Gemara said here, והתנענו לרן למשנה פחות משטות הגיעו ועד שטות ינקה. So Abaye said, הנה הרד אלוקים בגבי, which means he's not familiar, but אבל החדקים בגבי, which means that the buyer know clearly, he's not stupid, he know exactly the value of the estates in advance. Here we talk about the land, but he can juxtapose to any other form of real estate. Savir vekabil, he knows exactly what he was buying, and he accepted it as is. So Rav Papa still claimed, Veha Esrin Amar li, what are you talking about? The seller said to me clearly that he feels he's planting 20 seah, and it's not 20 seah, so he lied to me. He told me 20 and it's 15. So again, Abaye in his court rejected Rav Papa, and he said, Amar le de adifa ke-esrin. You know what he meant to say? That he has is a feed for planting 20 seah, and basically is good as a fruitful as one who feed to 20 seah, which means again is a endless argument, but the key is what exactly the statement and the properties values. But anyway, here we have a braita dealing with painful subject, which is disputation between brothers, which unfortunately happen a lot of times. It's a famous joke, and I repeat, it's only a joke, but you should know it's a nice joke. You go to different people, especially Sfaradim and Ashkenazim, you see two different statements. They give word of comfort to the mourners. One place they used to say, Hamakom yenachem etchem. Hamakom literally meaning the Almighty, but the idea is that the way it's saying Hamakom, it can be location. Hamakom yenachem etchem. On the other hand, you see people said Min hashamayim tenuchamu, that from heaven you will be comforted. So Hamakom in Hebrew also location. So if the deceased left properties, so it's the way you comfort the mourners. You said Hamakom yenachem etchem. You have all these real estate left, money, stocks, houses, stores. That will yenachem etchem, will give you comfort. Min hashamayim tenuchamu. If the deceased left nothing, then from heaven they will take care of you. It's a joke. So anyway, Tanya Rabbi Yossi Omer, ha'achin shechalku. We have here brothers. You know my way, I always give jokes. Anyway, two brothers divided the estate. Now the problem is, as much as they divided the estate, they have disagreements. And here is the Rashbam bring us a big chidush, and just for a moment we need to elaborate on this Rashbam. The Rashbam דיבור מתחיל קנו כולם, כלומר זה קנה לגמרי בגורל ולא יוכלו לחזור בהם. So basically what they do, כיוון שעלה גורל אחד מהם קנו כולם. So you make a lottery, so the moment the lot is for one of them drawn, they all acquire the remainder of the property, and they can no longer retract their decision to divide the estate in this manner. So if you skip several lines, you go the end of the narrow part of the Rashbam. He said, ואף על גב דלא אחזו כל אחד בשלו, כיוון הם מוחזקים ועומדים כולם בכל הקרקע, אין הגורל מקנה להם כלום, אלא מברר לכל אחד חלקו המגיע. So here the Rashbam tells us something very important. He said, look, the goral mevarer, the goral basically clarified. Goral clarified. So for example, you have a house, you have an upper level, lower level. So you have a lottery, and the lottery basically clarified. So I would like to share with you just a vignette. First and foremost, the Chavot Yair. The Chavot Yair said that they did it Goral al Pi Hashem, as the Torah tells us that use it in that term, so it will be accepted. But it was a story that written in response in a book called Shalmat Chaim. Shalmat Chaim is a book written by the late great rabbi in Yerushalayim, whose name is Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld. And the question was asked, it was a Chanukiah, it was a Chanukah menorah, very sentimental to two brothers, let's call them name, Reuven and Shimon. Each of them believes that when they make the bracha, they have a tremendous success, and they both of them wanted. So they made a lottery, and they do a lottery, and Reuven won the Chanukiah, the menorah. Unfortunately, right away they announced that Shimon is now in Hadassah hospital in ICU. What happened? He claimed that he had a heart attack. The doctors came and they said it's because he lost the menorah, and he is very upset, and he wants to die because he wanted that one. So they brought before Reuven and says, look, your brothers claim that he's going to die, and Reuven said, listen, I want this, it's mine. I won, and we did the lottery according to halacha. So they decided to go before the children of Shimon, and Reuven went before the court of Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld. So Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld asked a question. He says at that time it was the beginning of Russian Aliyah. They sent to Eretz Israel Russian Jews. So there was a Russian Jew that came before the rabbi, and he said, look, I get used to eat, bacon, pork, whatever it is in Russia. That was our food all the times. I'm so sick and tired of you bagels and you disgusting food or whatever it is. I'll be very ill if I don't eat pork right now. So Rabbi Sonnenfeld said, somebody said to me yesterday that he needs to go to swim in the water on Shabbat. So just because you claim that otherwise you become an ill, that's not sufficient, and that's not something that we go and said is a commandment. The 10th commandment repeats twice in the Torah. It's called Lo Tachmod. You should not desire, you should not covet things that it's not yours. So the Salmat Chaim, we said it in chapter 20, Perek Av Zayin, Chelek Sheni, second volume, chapter 27, Salmat Chaim, Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld. He ruled clearly, lucidly, that Reuven should not give the menorah to Shimon. And he said Shimon should overcome, should understand that the halacha is halacha and should not give a blackmail or should not threaten that he get a heart attack if he's not getting it. That's the way it is. It was a lottery, it was fair, it was made according to the Jewish law, and it's a done deal, period. But the derivative from this Rashbam, you can see more on the Lechem Mishneh, because the Lechem Mishneh on a Rambam in Ilchot Shchenim, Perek Bet, Halacha Yud Aleph, it's the law of the neighbor, chapter 2, Halacha 11. That's the way the Rambam said, that in a way, Goral Osek Inyan, at the moment you do the point of lottery, is basically the same as a matter of acquisition. Now, the Rosh disputed the Rambam. The Rosh, which the Torah brought him in Siman Kuf Ayin Gimel, in chapter 173, he disagreed with the Rambam. He holds Lo Mehane Goral Belo Chazaka. You cannot have a matter of lottery without a matter of Chazaka, a matter of a kinyan, matter of acquisition. So basically you see here a disputation between the Rashbam and in a way the Rambam versus the Rosh and the Ravid. And the Ravid in Hasagot hold the same as the Rosh, and he said that it's not the only the kinyan, Maaseh kinyan, is the matter of acquisition. So here you see a big disputation what exactly the lottery mean. The lottery is just clarification. The lottery is really a matter of total acquisition and final acquisition. If you go by the Rashbam here and the Rambam, so it's haknaya, it's matter of acquisition. If you go by the way that the Rosh, which brought in the two in Kuf Ayin Zayin, and the Ravid, it's not a matter of haknaya, and you have to have a separate matter of acquisition. The great late Rabbi Zolti, in his book Mishnati Avetz, he brought in Choshen Mishpat Siman Zayin, he brought that with all said and done, you have to have Chalukat Beit Din. You have to, during the day, obviously, the Beit Din have a session, the Beit Din are not convene at night, but they will go a day, and basically he explained that when it's come to lottery, come to Goral, there are two point. One is clarification, the other one is final stage, which is the Maaseh Kinyan. But in short, as you see, it's two different schools of thought, what exactly happened when the parties go with the lottery, and how the final lottery is the final stage. As we said, is a fascinating subject above the scope of the discussion of Daf Yomi today, but you get the vignette. So anyway, the Gemara said, "Mai tamar Rabbi Elazar ki tchilat Eretz Yisrael, ma tchila begoral, afkan begoral." You remember when the land of Israel divided, Moses transmitted the leadership to Joshua, and Joshua then divided. So it was in a way, precondition. You have one tribe, the tribe of Levi, they have the temple, so they don't have a section in the land. And then it was 2.5 tribes that won the Jordan side. Gad, Reuven, and Chatzi Menashe. So the rest of 8.5 tribes, they divided by the tribes and by the families. So how they do that? They took some type of lottery. So basically that's the way Joshua did, and each of them get. So here we juxtapose to our story, which is the divisiveness of a state, of heirs between brothers when it's come to inherited of a state of the late father. each party acquired their acquisition by using this term of drawing lots, and even in a way it was not drawn for everyone. The first one, it's already a matter of acquisition. So the Gemara's challenge that it said, if you compare it to the ancient time that divided the land of Israel to tribes, ma lehalan bekalpi ve'urim ve'tumim, afkan bekalpi ve'urim ve'tumim. That's painful question. You know, in those days it wasn't just a matter of doing it by lottery. It was also the Urim Vetumim. Simply speaking, Urim Vetumim is the one who mentioned the Torah in the Exodus 28, but Rashi explained that it's a name of God, presumably written on parchment, which was inserted between the folds of the high priest's breastplate. But if you go by the Mishnah in Tractate Yoma, page 71, you see there also in the Gemarrah in 73 that Urim Vetumim was a medium through which the high priest communicated with God at the behest of the king or the president of the high court. In a crisis, any communal figure may ask for direction from God through the high priest in the Urim Vetumim. So there are many instances in the Bible where it was done when a question was asked, and certain letters of the breastplate will be illuminated, providing the proper answer. So in the second temple, the Urim Vetumim was no longer extant. That's the Gemarrah in Sotah 48. So the question is, how you don't have the Urim Vetumim? Rabbi Yossi do not put the condition that when it's come to a lottery for the land, it has to be these two, Kalfi, the drawing of lot, and the Urim Vetumim. So Rav Ashi responds, Amar Rav Ashi, Vehu anaha lekaitzei la'adadei Gamrei umaknu lahadadei. So Rashi said, with the satisfaction of each of the brothers receives from the fact that they listen to each other and agree and accept the result of the lottery, they fully transfer the ownership of each other. So the division between them becomes final as soon as the first law is drawn. So Itmar. So now, since we talk about disputation over the estate, we have a disputation among the Amoraim. Shnei achim shechalku. You have the two brothers that they thought that they are only the heir, they're only the inheritors, and they divided the estate. Meaning, the Meir explained that they need to realize that they have another brother that was born in overseas, or another option that the brother thought that the other brother is no longer among the living. So basically what happened is Reuven and Shimon, the two brothers, took the estates that left from the father and divided between the two. But then guess what happened? So Levi came, and the third brother came from overseas, and he said, why in the world you divided the estates of my father, of our father? I entitled to take part of that. Rav Amar betela machloket u'Shmuel Amar mekamtzin. So Rav said that this, the way that they divided the estate is no longer valid because it's void, since the third brother, even you do it with Goral, with lottery, since the third party was not there and he was one of the brothers, therefore, and it was all not in his consent and knowledge and part of the deal, therefore it's a void, it's invalid, it's not legitimate, and everything go to square one. Shmuel Amar mekamtzin. Shmuel said, no, it's not that it's everything was done. He says that the original division of the estate is still valid, but the two brothers must each take off a share from the portion and give it to the third brother. אמר לו רבא לרב נחמן לרב דאמר בטלה מחלוקת עלמא הדרדינה. If you go by the Rabbi, says that all this divisiveness of the state is no longer a fact. So it means to say that the original, that is all deal was in error, and the original verdict is reconsidered, and the entire division is entire division is void. אלא מעתה הנה ביתלתה. If you have the three partners, the kaime ve'azul beitrei minai upalug, so they divided the estate without the third party knowledge, and they divided it to three different portions. So it means if the third party was not aware of this idea of dividing the estates, and now he came to the picture, you mean to say that again everything is go to square one, is the whole deal is no longer effect? Why not? Why you Rav hold that if you have two brothers that divided the estates prematurely or early by lottery, without the knowledge of the third brother living, or the third brother existed, and all of a sudden he came in, now he hold that you go to square one. So Rav Nachman explained, how do you compare the two? Hatam, if you have two partners that divided the estate without the knowledge of the third one, so here the big question is, if it was in their knowledge that there is a third party, you have three partners and two of them divided the estate, is one school of thought. Even they divided the estate by three different portions, still it wasn't the consent of the third party, versus two brothers that thought that they are the only the two brothers, and all of a sudden it turns that there is another brother they're not even aware of, either live overseas or they're not even aware that they have another brother. So it's a total different scenario. So therefore you cannot juxtapose the two, and I cannot compare and say that you can rule the same way in both. So therefore, according to Rav, the situation that the third brother appear, the original division is total void, and you have to go from square one and divide the estates by three different parts. Amar le Rav Papa l'Abaye l'Shmuel d'Amar mekamtzin. According to Shmuel, he said that the original dividing that is okay, and each party need to take part 1/3 of his estate and give it to the third brother. Lemeikam dekam dina. So you mean to say that the original way of dividing between the two brothers is effective. But then you contradict yourself, because you said that it's not really effective because each of them need to partake of their part and give it to the third one. Both Rav and Shmuel hold. Here we talk about kor b-30 ani mocher lach. So remember that discussion over selling kor in the 30. Yachol afilu miseah achrona, because the whole core we treat it as one unit. So therefore the Gemarrah Mekach, the final stage of sale, it's only when it's all effect to the very end. Kor b-30 seah besel ani mocher lach rishon kana, which means that each of them by measure out of him. So you see here the original verdict stands. So why in the first case may the seller renege even if the portion of the sale that already reach the buyer? So now we are on the page 107, the top of the page, and the Gemara explained, Hatam avud Rabbanan milta denicha lemocher venicha lalokeach. And that's an important concept. The sages try to be fair, in a sense, to play a role for both parties, for the seller and for the buyer. So each of them can back out and renege as long as the deal is not reached the final stage. So even Shmuel hold that originally, the moment that they have a verdict, they cannot change their mind. All of that is only if they took the part when it's the proper measurement. But here, when it's a turn that was a mistakes, so it's a total difference. The Rashbam elaborated and he said, in the second scenario of Rav and Shmuel, he said, Kor b-30 seim seah besel ani mocher lach. So it shows that each of them have a clear measurement. But the Rashbam go further and said, you see it also in Yad Ramah, he says, the pot that have two partners, never hot, never cold, which means when you have two brothers, each of them think that I know how to manage the estate, and I know better than you, and I follow the path of the father better than you, and I know how to do things, and the father basically wants to give it to me, and each of them badmouth the others and said he doesn't know management, doesn't know how to manage things, he doesn't behave the way brother said. There's all kind of claims that come out all of a sudden when you have a court session, and because of that, because no one of them get along with the others, therefore we have no choice but to interfere and make it in a way that it should be a permanent estate, and that's the way we roll. In conclusion, I would like to share with you an halacha that the Rambam tells us in Ilchot Nachalot, and you see it also in the in Chod Acharot chapter 10 and Shulchan Aruch Choshen Mishpat 175, if two brothers divided their father's estate between them, and then a third brother arrived, of whose existence they were unaware, the division is void. Even, that's the final, right? Even the estate comprised 3 fields, and each of the 2 brothers took one and divided the third between them, and when the third brother arrived, the Smar said, and performed a lottery, the third field fell into his lot. Any of them can void the division and insist that the lot drawn anew. Even if the third brother agrees to take a portion for each of the brothers 2, either of the 2 can still void the initial decision since it was based on error. Basically, that's follow the statement of Rav, who's ruling that later we're going to study it on page 107, and as we said, that's the Shulchan Aruch Choshen Mishpat 175 and the Sma.